Welcome to Rapid Harmony. I'm Kyle Emmanuel Brown. This is a space for high achieving souls who want more than outcomes. You want resonance, you want truth, you want a life that moves with purpose instead of pressure. Here, we explore success with the soul and direction with depth. We slow things down just enough to hear your own wisdom again. We breathe, we question, we remember the part of you that never needed permission to leave. Every conversation is an invitation to trust yourself more than the noise around you, and live from that clarity that rises when you stop forcing and start listening. Take a breath, settle in, let's begin. So Adam, what is one moment when reality glitched so hard that you knew with zero doubt that the universe was interactive, and if you told the full story, most people would either wake up or think you're crazy?
Honestly, I have many moments like this, but I feel like some of the most powerful ones where I've experienced that was at Burning Man. And in particular, there's one story that actually might do that to people, where we were at Entheon Village, and we had planned to have this big circular star council of all the leaders of the camp, leaders from other camps. We were going to white procession out to the temple, and the heart space, the big event space inside the center of the camp, was taken over by a dubstep party. And not just any dubstep party, but a sort of vampire zombie dubstep party where literally people are in this, like dancing like this, like look completely unconscious, completely drugged out. And the DJ guys up on the stage, and one guy in particular, they're just got this look on their face, like they're just feeding off of this crowd and this energy. So my friend Naima Lightseed comes over to me, Pleiadian priestess, and she's like, Apollo, what do we do? How are we going to do this? Like, we can't just, they're just not going to stop, basically. And so I kind of moved into the space, moved through all the zombies, and it felt so gross in there. The energy was just, and I realized I couldn't actually go in and have conflict with the guys on the stage. They were in way too much of a like riled up, probably fueled by some horrible white powders or something like that. And so I end up going behind the whole space, and there was a pyramid on the ground, this like pyramid that we'd built as part of this sequence inside the camp that was designed like the energy systems of the body. So I was going above the heart center and up into these higher chakra centers. And I did grounding at the pyramid. I activated the masculine and the feminine temple spaces, one by one. I went into the union temple space, and a sister literally walked in there at the exact same time as me. We sat down and we had this beautiful masculine, feminine pleasure alchemy prayer. And then I moved out of that space into the unity temple space, which was all these 8 I Ching symbols in a circle with sacred altars, and honored each of the elements and the directions. And my friend Valeda comes in. She's like, Apollo, what do we do? How do we stop the dance party? She's like, I think it's Charles, and he's gone crazy, and he's on some drugs, and I don't know how to stop it. And I looked at her and I said, well, what part of Charles is so traumatized that he won't let go? And she looks at me and she's like, oh my gosh, I can totally see it. I can see his childhood trauma in this. And I was like, let's hug him together. And so we hugged Charles energetically as we hugged each other. And in that exact second, the music shut off and it went quiet. And she's like, oh my God, do you think it worked? And I was like, I think it's working. And she's like, okay, I'm going to go back and check and then just come in a minute. So she goes back, and I very slowly finish my prayer. And then I start moving back down the energy body, and I get to the heart space and I walk in. This is within probably 5 minutes. And there's 2 concentric circles, people all already in the Star Council. The music is gone, the DJs are gone, all the zombies are gone. It's completely transformed.
Ah,
And I knew right then, to do the big magic, don't go at the conflict. Go above the system and change it from its origin point.
oof. I love that. And I want to expand on that a little bit before we get into the next thing.
Cool.
I wear a lot of fun jewelry, and this little guy here is new as a little, Eagle Hawk energy,
Yes.
which was to get that
Altair.
30,000 foot view and to really look down upon the scene and not just be stuck in the forest, only seeing the tree in front of you.
So important.
Was there a moment where you realized the gold in that?
Yeah, seeing above the picture has been my mechanism of change for my whole life. I know that when you try to make change with an individual or an organization or a company, you're usually fighting the momentum of their own emotional bodies, their trauma bodies, their, mental obsession with a specific operational approach to things. And oftentimes that doesn't work. And what you actually need to do is exit that construct and essentially make a higher construct that serves them and serves everybody else, that everybody can kind of be upgraded into. And both Einstein and Buckminster Fuller have excellent quotes on this. And I don't know if I can nail both of them perfectly, but essentially it's that, if you want to make change, don't fight the existing reality. Build a new system that the old reality can upgrade into.
I love that. I love that. And if you're listening at home, have you ever had a moment where life felt less like a solid fixed thing and more like a conversation you were secretly having with the universe? Maybe it was a wild synchronicity that made the hair on your arm stand up. Maybe it was a nudge you followed that changed everything, and you could not explain it with spreadsheets or log. So most people, they shove these moments into mental junk, but my guest today, my buddy here, Adam Apollo, he built his life and work around them. Now, Adam is a physicist, a futurist, and a visionary architect who works at the intersection of unified physics, real-world magic, and conscious technology. He has taught unified physics and self-mastery to students around the globe. He's advised organizations shaping the future of tech and education, and is actively building a planetary operating system to help humanity collaborate instead of collapse. So in this episode, what we're talking about, what really actually is, how to work with the field without losing your mind, and how to design businesses, technologies, and lives that are coherent with your soul and your planet. So if you ever felt the pull to something a little bit bigger than your to-do list, this is the conversation that is an invitation to trust that pull. It's unified physics, real magic, and building a planetary operating system with Adam. So Adam, welcome to Rapid Harmony.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you, Kyle. And can I get you to write my bio for every talk? I mean, that was high quality. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the beauty is I don't just get to interview you. I get to hang with you, man. That's right. This is an absolute joy. And, we've gotten to sit down a little bit in some group settings. We haven't gotten to drop in so much on your story. So I'm happy I get to dig in a little bit deeper in person now that everybody listening gets to listen. So with your story, what happened? How old are you? And when did you experience in time the moment of like, maybe this isn't my first rodeo. Maybe I've been here before. And maybe there's more than just meets the eye of you here as Adam Apollo.
Yeah. I know the exact second. I mean, I would say I've had moments, even from childhood throughout my life, that I wasn't sure I belonged here. That was more the feeling. It was a sense of disgust with the way that our society, our culture, our reality, our education systems, the way we've applied ourselves as humans really bothered me, especially in my middle school days. After I lost my stepmom in a car accident, I could see how much we've all gotten used to just lying to each other as a way of life. And by the time I got into high school, I was 15 years old, and I had an older friend. He was 2 grades up from me, so he was a junior in college at the time, or high school at the time. Had a car, had the subwoofer. We'd do hacky sacking. He'd take me for coffee. We'd go hang out, go to his house, play video games, just do fun stuff. And I remember we got into these conversations about how you could feel it when someone's looking at you from across the room. How is it possible that your ears could burn, as so many people say, when someone's talking about you? There has to be some mechanism, some physics to this. And after a series of different kind of experiments, we landed on one that an older friend of his had shown him. And you put your fingertips together, touching lightly, and you very slowly separate them in front of you. And you look and you focus on the space created between the fingertips. And if you do this slowly enough while keeping focus there, what happens is you've literally entangled the energetic structures of the protons on your fingertips to each other. And you can actually see and feel the biofield that's generated between your hands. I didn't know any of that. All I do is I saw sparkles and light and streams of energy between my hands, and I could feel the tingle on my fingertips. And as a 15-year-old kid, I thought, I've found the Force. And now I want to be a Jedi, right?
That's right.
I began to test this with my best friend, Christopher. And we did everything from blindfolded, trying to entangle with an object, hide it somewhere in the room, and then see if you could feel where that object's located by feeling which finger it's on and turning towards that until your middle finger is pointing you right there. And it worked. And we were like stunned that it worked. I could feel where the object was with my hand. I started feeling deeper into other things, like how do I connect to a rock or a tree or a mountain? And I remember it was only about maybe a week or two after this initial popping open in my consciousness that I was up in the Blue Ridge Mountains and I grounded down through the earth. I reached out to feel the center of the earth for the first time energetically. And after that, everything changed. The amount of downloads and consciousness and essentially memories that I had pouring in, although I didn't know that's what they were at the time, was like an Akashic library of knowledge available to me. And I became a magi and I was teaching students. I mean, right away, my entire life started transforming. I went from shy and shut down to completely activated, empowered, curious, and creating.
Wow. So one thing that you just mentioned that so many people on the spiritual path miss that needs to be reiterated is you tapped into the center of the core of Earth.
That's right.
Most people, when they start stepping into a spiritual path, treat this place worse. They feel, I'm not from here, forget everything here, everyone here, everything here.
Yeah.
You didn't go up to the stars, you went down to the core of the earth.
That's right.
I want you to expand on that a little bit. Like what pulled you into that and what did you learn from that?
Well, in reflection, looking at the past and knowing what I know now, I would say that most people's spiritual traditions and religious traditions often have built-in bypassing, unfortunately. And so when you say you're one with everything, but you're not actually feeling and experiencing that, you're actually bypassing the process that you must do within to experience actual oneness. And we also have this with the whole ascension meme. Everybody wants to ascend, but what does ascending actually mean? Nobody even really mostly knows what they're talking about. They usually are thinking like, okay, we need to go to higher dimensions, but does that mean we just leave the physical dimension? Does that mean we just like become spirit beings? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to happen no matter what. And it's going to happen when you die.
Right.
So you're going to ascend no matter what when
It's
you
a
die.
guarantee.
But while you're in a physical body, it's actually pretty important. And I think for me, my own soul lineage has been such a deep earth guardian. And not just that, but I am a priest of the goddess, you could say. I am a guardian of the goddess. I am a worshiper of the goddess. And I didn't know what any of that meant back then, but what it really means to me now and what happened to me then was that I began my path by recognizing the sacred in all things. Not some ghost in the sky, not some personality, not some bearded dude, but the actual field itself as being sacred, and how the field around us and in us and through us links us to all of these incredible things. And when I connected to the core of the earth that day, that was the beginning of realizing something that once in one of my lifetimes, it was called the anchor of Elysiar. And essentially, it's a mechanism of connecting to God through relaxation by grounding and realizing that your pull towards the center of all existence is actually just gravity. The center of the earth is linked to the center of the moon, is linked to the center of the sun, is linked to the center of the galaxy, is linked to the center of the Laniakea galactic cluster, or the distributed gravitational center there, is linked to the distributed gravitational center of the entire universe, and so on and so forth into, who knows, the great mystery, right? So your fastest way to the heart of all things is actually just relaxing, letting gravity pull you like love towards the center.
I love that. And one of the biggest awarenesses as I was in my journey of total self-trust was a shift in the final letter in my empower process, which is the R, which starts with the envisioning and remembering it's not the escape up the chakra system, it's the bringing down. And R changed from raise into root, which is 7, kind of like the 7 main chakras. And that we needed to root down. And I was deep in meditation, and it was like, root, this is not a raise issue. We aren't trying to leave this human experience. And a lot of my lessons come in through humor. And one of the funny little visualizations that came to me was an imagining that we're sitting here and we've got the earth bong and we're all taking a big hit from it. And then we come back after this human experience and we sit around and your buddy was like, how was Earth? How was the food? How was the dating? How was the intimacy? What was it like, having a hamburger and French fries? And you're like, oh, I thought I was supposed to be a renunciate. And they're like, dude, hit it again. You forgot.
Yeah.
And experiencing so-called heaven on earth.
Yes.
And the second piece, which I think I would love to have you expand on, is I think humans forget, first, besides the fact that we forget that we're part of the animal kingdom and symbiosis with the earth, we also forget the little microcosm of time that we have been here. And we know within the human experience, the wisdom that comes as we hit our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. But what about the millennia that this planet has been here? Right. So when you tapped into the core and the wisdom, what did that feel like inside? And how can you describe that to somebody? They're like, how do you know you tapped into something and weren't just having a hallucination?
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty practical experience. If you actually relax and just actually meditate on linking down through the earth and feeling the core of the earth, when you begin to feel the moon from there, it actually feels like this subtle undulation, and it's in your sacral, because your root chakra locks into the core of the earth, but your sacral locks into that earth moon balance point, like the center of gravity that's actually inside the earth, but it's not in the very center. It's around the center. where the moon's gravitational link to the Earth is. And that's part of the engine that's churning the inside of the Earth, generating the magnetosphere from a science and physics standpoint. And so you feel this little undulation in your sacral field. And then when you relax even further and you start to ground into the core of the sun, you'll feel this openness, warmth, light in your belly. I began to start to kind of feel the planets as this giant clock that's configuring my mental state based on the collective field. And my mind becomes this sort of big, expansive architecture, unlimited architecture. And then when I ground through that and relax deeper into the heart of the galaxy, I actually feel it in my heart. And when, at least for me, because my heart's been broken open so many times and torn apart, and I've gone through so much in my life, my heart is very tender and soft and vulnerable and open. So the moment I connect to the center of the galaxy there, I immediately feel love. I feel the experience viscerally in my body of love. I feel this open spreading of like wings inside of my chest, a presence that's deeper and more coherent and profound. And then, you know, the galactic cluster throat chakra experience is, in the beginning, it'll be more subtle, and most people might not even notice it or experience it. But in its heightened states, I'll say, when you really know how to practice this and you're doing it energetically, as they say in Tai Chi, seeing the flag, not just going through the motions, but you see the energy, you see the flag. When you get to the throat level, it's like every language, every culture, every dynamic difference that makes us all different and perfect in all these beautiful ways. You can feel that. You can essentially feel this sense that all cultures are perfect for a perfect reason and are part of something bigger. And then your third eye opens and you start to really feel this universal wholeness to everything. You really actually experience a feeling like the universe is one big giant thing that's happening for you. And that is the journey to the experience of oneness, which is why it's such a powerful grounding exercise. And from there, you realize you don't actually know what's beyond that. You don't know what's beyond the universe. Nobody knows what the infinity verse is, the multiverse, the et cetera. And so then as you ground past that, you're actually grounding into mystery. You're grounding into the experience that you don't actually know. And there's something so profound about that, because it's a humble releasing of everything we grip onto. We know what's up. Right. I know the answer to that question. No, it's actually the part of you that can rest in the not knowing. And it's a visceral experience. There's no doubt about it when you do it right.
I love that. And I want to link it back to something you said that relates to the whole idea of science. Science, I think in many cases, people have mistaken science for their need for certainty.
Oh, good one. Nice.
So they say science equals certainty, when science all starts with hypothesis.
That's right.
And you're a physicist.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people who are just getting on this path, or those who are like, show me the PubMed, show me the PubMed, show me the PubMed.
Sure.
And I look at the two sides of the polarity through my lens, and I look at that no different than saying, show me where in this textbook that I can look it up, almost like the Dewey Decimal System. John 3:16 or whatever it is, that I can look it up here and it has these exact words that doesn't tell that.
Yeah.
I would love your insight and your opinion on this. And I know I probably just pissed off two polarities in this right now. And there's only like 3 people at home listening now, and I just lost everybody. But I'm okay with that because of the truth. I don't think so either. I think at the end of the day, if you're tuning into me and my authenticness and seeing Adam coming on here, you're probably a pretty open-minded male or female,
That's true.
on that entrepreneurial self-mastery journey. So it's a beautiful thing. So I'm curious what your take is on that intertwining of science and spirituality and the metaphysical, maybe a little on where it went into its own polarity and separation and how we can bring it back.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much I could bite into there, but I will start with a really interesting little reminder. So at one point, less than 100 years ago, it was really good science that if you wanted to fix a cold or pneumonia, you would do heroin.
That's right.
That was really good science.
That's right.
And you know why it was good science? Because they had people take heroin and they noticed, oh, all those symptoms go away. Isn't that cool? They didn't do the deeper science. They didn't know the next steps, right, of the puzzle. So we're always theorizing, coming to a conclusion, but the conclusion is only as good as the context of our thinking. So as a unified physicist, when I was in high school, my work was to look at where is the edges of our thinking? Where's the fallacy in our thought? And I already knew there was a major problem because if I could create a ball of chi in my hands and take anyone in my high school, it doesn't matter, teacher, student, and I did all the time, and have them put their hand out, and I could move this ball of chi even from 5 feet away, 10 feet away. I could move the chi along their arm and they could feel it, tingles. That means that me as a high school kid can create a phenomenological experience that's validatable and repeatable, just like science in an experiment. And so the big question is, where is that in our science then? Why isn't chi, ki, prana, vital force, etc. in our science? And the truth is that it was called the ether. And the ether was the foundation of our understanding of the 4 elements, which then became the studies of thermodynamics, fire, aerodynamics, air, hydrodynamics, water, and geophysics, earth. We just named the branches of study, but they're still based literally on the elementals: solids, liquids, gases, plasmas. This is the foundation of all physics, right?
Right.
We just made it less magical sounding.
That's right.
And the ether was always the fundamental. And yet the ether, as you know, the period of the Enlightenment into the 1800s, from about the 1600s to 1800s, the Christian church got really uppity about anyone using any term or idea that sounded like God. If it sounds like God, in other words, it's a field underlying things and giving rise to stuff, that sounds like God, you're in their domain. So there's a reason why people like Isaac Newton, for example, he was a closet alchemist secretly. There's a great documentary about it, The Secret Life of Newton. And he kept all his deep metaphysical ether explorations, philosopher's stone explorations secret, so that the church would never find out. And that pattern continued all the way up into the end of the 1800s. And by the end of the 1800s, you have essentially scientists trying to get the ether out. So Michelson and Morley, they do this silly tabletop experiment. They think that with some lasers on a tabletop, they can literally detect the pressure of the Earth hurtling through space, pushing through the ether, and that it should somehow be messing with the lasers on this table or the lights on this table. And of course, they didn't find anything, so they called it proof. And then Einstein wrote Special Relativity, and he's like, oh, well, we don't need a luminiferous ether. I can describe light and its properties just by pure logic. And then 10 years later, Einstein writes a paper called General Relativity, and he shows that light bends when this field, the fabric of space-time, bends. In other words, his teacher, Lorentz, at the time was the guy who pointed it out, and he was like, Einstein, you just proved the ether exists, right? Because this thing underlying light that moves light, that's the ether, that's the field. So Einstein writes a paper called The Ether and General Relativity. And in it, he says specifically, Space-time without an ether is unthinkable. You cannot have the properties of general relativity without an underlying mechanical structure to the field of space. And you know what happened? It got completely blocked by all the other scientists. Nobody picked it up. They always like, oh, it's Einstein. He's getting old, right? He's getting crazy. He's talking about the ether again. That's like God stuff. And so even though it's still in some universities, it was completely blocked. And that right there is the heart of the answer I'm giving you in the lesson, which is that even when we know fundamentally something's true in science, and some of our best thinkers come to this conclusion, societal momentum, academic momentum, the tenure of the professors who are in the universities, especially in the big Ivy League groups, there is a structure that controls how we grow from those standpoints. And when you point to things that empower people way beyond what the existing infrastructure allows for, it scares them. It scares them. And so you have to pierce through to a higher order, a higher structure to actually get the real physics, because the real stuff absolutely is foundationally built on this fundamental field. And once you understand this field, it gives you the keys to the strong force, the weak force, memory. Gravity and electromagnetism suddenly pair. The strong force becomes gravity. The weak force is just a spin decay process that comes when you separate molecules. All these answers get solved and the forces get unified. And that is the, huge work that me and my colleagues have been doing over the last 20 years or so, 25 years.
I love that. And I think a funny analogy that was coming to me that I think can be a little bit relatable is the FBS in college sports, where people are saying, wait, we get to this decision-making board and you choose these 8 teams that make the playoffs, but this makes no sense. But there's underlining factors, which are money and control. Mm-hmm. And we can see that as an observer to sports. You can say, oh, there's some money and control, which makes this thing make sense. Right. That makes no sense, which is very similar to we look at this and we say, wait, there is this whole line of physics that is now slowly getting introduced to us, like quantum physics and understanding the unified field. Why wasn't this introduced to us if Einstein was talking about it?
Exactly.
Because that was a long time ago. Yeah. It's before any of us were here.
It's 100 years ago.
Why do you think that they're keeping this stuff pushed to the side as woo, so to speak, and just putting this overarching term that just makes it non-scientific?
Well, yeah, the worst part is that their current model is actually very non-scientific. If you look at the strong force, for example, what is the strong force? Well, it's the force that holds together protons in the nucleus of an atom, right? Protons and neutrons, as we say. And it only exists for a very short range, and nobody knows what it is or why it is what it is. So we just figured it's a really strong force. This is how powerful it is and how short its range is. Let's call it the strong force. Right. That was it. And then the same thing when we blast apart protons and we get quarks. We just call the force that somehow binds these quarks together that we don't understand with quarks that we call fundamental particles that we also don't understand, which dissolve back into space-time in split seconds. And we just called it the color force. And so we call it quantum chromodynamics because it sounds really fancy. When we don't know what the color force is, we don't know what the quarks are. We have no idea. It doesn't. We don't know how they're bonded together. So we create a new thing called gluons to bond them together. This is not scientific. This is us doing experiments, not knowing what the heck is happening, and coming up with names and force amounts to name the things we don't understand.
And is this all done to create certainty?
Yes. To create us an illusionary sense of certainty. Yes. And not only that, but, for example, you look at CERN, and CERN has at different points in time, for example, they were receiving $10 billion a year to find the Higgs boson. Now, Peter Higgs was kind of a brilliant guy because what he did is he was like, the thing that would fix all of this is to have a fundamental field like the ether. But we can't call it the ether because that would sever everybody else. So instead, let's call it the Higgs field and the Higgs boson. And so he just took an idea that was already foundational to the solving all the problems in physics. He repurposed it. He wrote up his own sort of memes around it and structure around it and used it to get $10 billion a year in funding at CERN. So once you have papers published like Nissim Haramain, my close colleague who I built the Resonance Academy for Unified Physics for and with, you have him saying, oh, well, you don't need the Higgs boson. I can determine the mass energy of a proton and a black hole just through simple geometry. What happens? All those guys that are making the $10 billion a year and putting that to work, and the guys behind the tenure and behind the academic shares, they're like, whoa. That is way too simple of an answer. Like, there's no way it can be true. And besides, this guy was filmed talking about spaceships one time. He must be nuts. He was saying there was ships flying in and out of the sun. He must be nuts. So anything that can keep the ideas that actually would work and dismantle the old system in the box of pseudoscience is serving the current academic establishment's ability to continue to secure money, tenure, financing, and etc. Because it's just it's like that's where and how this is the certainty construct that money will flow with.
That's right. And the certainty of this, if you don't understand it in science, look at it amongst the uncertainty in things like politics and just come back to one question, which is follow the money.
Follow the money.
And
every time.
If you've gotten to this place, which you've gotten to, where you're like, okay, I'm tapped in, I'm awake, I'm realizing some of these powerhouses that are afraid of letting people know that there's uncertainty. You've gotten into this place, and then you've also tapped into stuff that pushes people beyond their typical comfort zones. So I'll give you an example.
Sure.
For me, one of the things that I've opened up to on this path is a willingness and acceptance to say, what if I don't know a lot? And what if everything I've been shown is just a piece of a puzzle that's much bigger?
Right.
And I think that's given me some of the coolest life opportunities. One of those was an awareness of the concept that maybe day one wasn't really day one. And that's a big thing that's hard to understand if you just look through a physical lens of like, mom and dad had some fun, had some intimacy, you were created, sperm meets egg, voila. And you can all see that in the physical.
Right. In
your journey, you have something which I think is a total gift, which is past life recollection. And I would love to hear, when did that click in for you, and what was that experience like?
Yeah. The first times, the first keys that it was happened when I was really little, and I didn't understand what it was. I just knew I saw a sword on the wall of my dad's friend's house. I remember nothing about the house or the guy or anything, but I could tell you every detail about that sword and the way that it affected me. I practiced martial arts as a kid. I always thought the teachers were doing it wrong, and the black belts. And so I had a really hard time staying in classes. I didn't want to. And I had friends who were studying the martial arts, Taekwondo and karate in particular, and they would come and train with me. And I found that I was able to always match them, like keep up with them, whatever level they'd learned or trained, I could just meet them there. And I didn't understand that. I just knew I loved to do it and to move. And it wasn't until I had a few different experiences, and one was a flashback to Atlantean times with some older brothers that I talk about in my book, The Dragon Key. And then after that, there was a series of experiences that started when I went into college, where I had so many things happen in a sequence that there was no way I could deny or ignore the information I was getting and the memories I was having from other lifetimes anymore. And the reason is because Yeah, it was a girl. I'm dating her roommate. We have a flashback into a medieval ballroom. I could feel the ornamental armor I'm wearing, smell the oil lamps burning, see the tapestries, feel my ornamental sword. I'm in love with this woman in that time. And I'm talking about protecting grain trade through a valley, with these two lords. And then I'm back in the dorm room talking to my two friends, and they're looking at me like, are you okay, Apollo? And I get some water. I come back in, and she's washing her face in the bathroom, the girl. And she had been talking to two of her friends, and she looks up at me and she's like, oh my God, did you? And I'm like, yeah, you did too. And sure enough, we'd had that experience simultaneously. And then within a couple weeks of that, we're at a Halloween party. A guy gets drunk. Neither of us really know. And he's interested in one of her friends. And he starts crying and bawling and apologizing to me for things he did to me in the Middle Ages in that same lifetime. And the villages he burned, the castle he came to lay siege to, him and I stopping the siege and fighting in my courtyard to the death and killing each other. And that experience with him was so viscerally painful and powerful and clear. And without any context, any point of reference, there was no way he knew any of the things that he could have known. And there was no way I would have resonated with them so strongly if they weren't true. And that's when I started really studying it like a science and realizing this is like a transpersonal psychological approach. You just take in the data, you look at what people's dreams or memories or flashbacks or psychedelic journeys or whatever it is, whatever it says, let's just look at the data. And then from looking at the information, you start to see and be able to pull out deeper things, deeper patterns about places, historical references, personal experiences that cross over with people in history. And you can dial deeper and deeper until you begin to actually be able to map the time periods, the places, and in some cases, the people and the names that you've had in different lifetimes.
I love that. And first off, it sounds like your buddy redefined what truth serum is, right? That's a whole nother level.
Boy, yeah, I know.
Truth serum all the way back to the Middle Ages.
Probably drinking some really crappy keg beer too.
Right. Laced with DMT, I guess.
I mean, man, it was a surprise for her and I. It was really intense.
Wow.
It was really intense.
And for me, one of the first places past lives came in was I had someone reach out to me about my daughter and her type 1 diabetes and started getting into depth and said that she had regressed herself and started going into a particular story. And the visceral, I'll save the story for another time, but the gist of it was, she said, and do you have any issues when you're around knives or with women with scarves, like the thin scarves around their neck?
Right.
And the second I read that message from her, I was bawling. I just started bawling. And I had remembered the idea that tears are the soul's recognition of the truth. And anyone who knows me intimately knows I'm like a worried Jewish mother when it comes to knives around. I am the worst. I panic around knives for no logical reason. And then internally, anytime I've seen a little scarf around the neck, I always just get really like this, even when women are wearing them for something a little bit more mysterious or a little bit more edgy. I always still just like get really locked in. And all of that just clicked in because I had slit her throat in a past life.
I see.
And she was my daughter in that particular experience. And it was a very complicated high priest role of basically either I have to end her life or my whole family's gone in the moment. And what is really wild, I always think when it comes to past life stuff, is when, as far as data points go, you lock in and you connect to people who don't know each other in all different places and other people who are really tapped in. And you get really detailed similarities. Those to me are the most profound, where in anything that I've had that's been extraordinary or extraterrestrial or beyond logic, left brain rational, Um, I love when there's others around to verify I'm not just hallucinating between left and right hemisphere.
Sure.
And two, external third-party validation
Yes.
when there's no incentive. It's not like they're getting a paycheck from me. It's not like they're doing something to try to be my friend,
No.
but they get those same pieces and in some cases synchronicities.
Yeah.
And with everything you studied with the unified field, I would love to hear your thoughts on just the overall concept of synchronicity. Like, what is a synchronicity?
Oh, that's a juicy one. Okay. Let me tap into the highest possible, shortest possible truth I could give you for that one. I would say that synchronicity is when there is an energetic harmonic entanglement between specific people and places and times. And when location and person and field all come into coherence, what happens is that you begin to already see the sacred pattern that your soul has chosen as part of your life path. So someone shows up at the exact right moment, the exact right time, and the exact right energy that you get to intersect with that moment and realize that everything is actually being created by our creative experience, by our choices, by our will, and by our state. And that when we're in a state to be able to see that soul pattern, you win the lottery over and over and over and over again. I mean, I've literally won the lottery of synchronicities probably actually 10,000 times plus or something. The amount of times I've run into a friend I haven't seen in 7 to 10 years or 5 years, just because I lingered a minute longer at this cafe, or just because I decided to stop at the gas station first before I went to the grocery store. You can list all kinds of things, but clearly there is this precise energetic correlative to the unfolding of the pattern in our reality, to the inner state within us. And how does that all work? Well, because the entire field has energy and feedback. So the entire field is constantly in a feedback state to our state. And therefore, your friend, the other person, the other thing, they also get the subtle nudges as you get the subtle nudges as you're pulling towards this intersection of harmonic attraction to each other in that moment to have that synchronicity.
I want to bring it all back to self-trust, which is the awareness embodied in the day-to-day of these synchronicities. How have you taken everything you studied, leaned into, stuff that in the past would have gotten you burned at the stake? In your current life, I'm sure got you bullied in some capacity in some ways, or at least got you outsidered or ostracized. How have you leaned into self-trust, and how do you continue to lean into self-trust around your awareness?
Yeah. I mean, it took me a long time, and I can say that there's still parts of me that get nervous or have anxiety when, sharing things that push beyond what people are accepting or willing to look at. And I had a period where, for example, all the crimes of Christianity was a major anger point for me. And so in a lot of talks, I would talk about the things I was really upset about in denial of murder of millions of women across Europe, for example, who are herbalists, and the bypassing of that religion. And not to mention, childhood rape, priests, like the kinds of really dark things that have come out of all of that. And I think that in a way, by allowing myself to just speak to the truth and speak truth to power and say what I needed to say and not care what anybody else thought, was a strengthening process for me.
Yeah.
But I do care what people think. We all do. And so over time, I've learned how to be more diplomatic. I've learned how to be more wise with how I share about things to create safety for the people who are listening.
Yeah.
So that if you don't believe in this or you don't think that way, well, at least I've spoken in such a way that gives you an opportunity to at least look at it and question it for yourself and make your own decision. And that's been my goal for a long time. And it's very, very true of the past lives thing, because that's not a general part of our Western society. Whereas if you go to India, you've got a belief system built in that reincarnation happens. Of course, it has its own weaknesses, like the caste system, the belief that you're going to only incarnate into whatever this karmic strata is that you're in. That's a whole of its own distortion. But I would say that in my own personal experience, it's helped a lot to understand that there is really foundational science behind past life work. Most people don't know of the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson, who literally did work on thousands of kids. I talk about him in the book, and they were able to foundationally prove that these kids had memories of other times and other lives. In many cases, were able to actually find people in more recent history that was the person that the child remembered. The person in history would have a wound or something from a bullet wound or a knife wound or different kinds of things. The child now would have birthmarks that match that. Mm-hmm. There would be specific memories. For example, James Leninger's very famous story was big on the news. He was one of the kids that Ian Stevenson was studying, and he remembered the names of his entire squadron in World War II. And they were able to not only find his squadron, find where he was stationed near Tujima, but they actually went out in a boat to the area where he believed he crashed his plane, and they found his plane in the water.
Wow.
So, and that's just one example of countless examples that have proven this to be true. So the real question is to the people out there, if that is proven to be true, then what part of you is resisting even inquiring around it? And maybe you should soften that resistance, and maybe it's actually worth looking into, because after all, if you, let's say, developed baking skills over multiple lifetimes in France, or you developed specific public speaking skills, or the ability to scribe in certain ways and do calligraphy, or a sword mastery, or horse mastery, or any of these things, wouldn't you rather just remember how to do it and just know already that that skill is yours rather than starting from scratch?
I think for most, there's a fear of what if everything I have been programmed with is wrong?
Yeah.
And most aren't willing to step outside of that. And I'm hoping if somebody's listening to a podcast called Rapid Harmony, they have at least the first step, which is admitting they have a problem, which is I'm not in harmony and I want some harmony.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest ways to inner harmony is stepping into the awareness of childlike joy and curiosity is the antithesis of stress, overwhelm, burnout. It's an endless well of excitement, enthusiasm, and new discoveries. And that's what science should be all about. And it's what science used to be all about. And for me, I look at the basis of all of this and I say, okay, when it comes to the past life pieces, a lot of times we think in terms of past lives just as all these cool, amazing things the past life did, and we don't lean into the shadows.
Right.
And when I went down a past life rabbit hole with 2 different main past lives, one of the things that really blew my mind is when I dug into an autobiography all around truth. And I started linking up not just the cool things this person has done and the similarities and synchronicities around that in my path right now, but also the shadows that they've overcome. Things like, for example, really deep shyness, certain issues around self-worth, and also certain unique passions that weren't their profession. things related to health and fitness and nutrition during times where these things were completely ostracized.
Right.
When you've linked up in the past life space to some of your past life awarenesses, has there been anything that's really surprised you?
Oh my God. Yeah, countless things.
Give me
I've
one.
gone through all kinds of stuff, man. And the reality is that, just like in this life, when you think about the past, what do you remember? If you just scan your life, what are the things you remember? You remember either the biggest successful, pleasurable moments
Right.
or the most painful ones.
That's right.
And it's usually one or the other or both, right?
Yeah.
And so it's the same is true of past lives, because these are the sort of peak experience moments of emotion, of connection, of breaking connection, of having it. And so it's the times where you fell in love with that person that becomes a massive shining point. And if you meet them again in this life, you feel that moment shining in the field of your quantum history, essentially. Or you have the breaking up with the person, the loss of them, the death of your partner, the birth of a child, the loss of a child, the depth of building something massive, or the pain of betrayal and having people you trust massively turn against you. So these are all the brightest points in the sort of constellation of our experience. And for me, yeah, I had a lot of things surprise me. So I knew, for example, about a Russian lifetime. I don't talk about this one very much because I don't like to, you have to give enough context to make sure it comes across clear. But I left the military when I was young. I ended up kind of escaping into being a dancer in St. Petersburg with some ballet dancers. And I was remembering my martial arts from past lives. So I was using all these martial arts techniques while they're doing ballet. The Tsar loved it. He hired us. He's my friend in this lifetime, as well as his wife. And so I would perform for the Tsar in his palace. And then at one point, I was pretty intuitive, and I picked up that somebody was trying to poison him, and I stopped him from drinking it. I saved his life. And he was so thankful, but he also then let me into his deeper world and how much conflict was around him. He ends up giving me a castle far to the south, and he tells me to kind of keep an eye on this region and these villages. So I move there. I end up being a metaphysical wizard up in a library tower castle, coming down to these villages, occasionally getting a girlfriend to come back with me and whatever. And sure enough, there's these groups that start coming into the villages, and they're raping, pillaging, stealing. They come in at night, they break into some place, they steal a bunch of stuff, they rape the women, and they leave. And I'm trying to figure out, how do I stop this pretty well-armed, group from doing this? And because I'd had some past life memories in Japan and different techniques I learned and ninja techniques and things, I ended up hiding out in the rooftops in black, waiting until the group goes into one of the places. The guy who's standing outside, keeping watch, I dropped down and I stabbed him in the neck. And what I did is I took a bucket and I was draining his blood into the bucket, and I tied him up by his feet, hung him up in an alleyway, and let his blood drain out into this bucket, and stayed there as long as I could while they were inside until I heard them coming back out. And then I hid and I took the bucket. So they came out and they saw their friend strung up, bloodless, with barely any blood on the ground, but his all is white and he's all drained. And you know what they thought? Vampire. And this worked well because in the region there was all these stories of vampires, and it was part of the mythos of the time and the legend. So for me, it was a method of doing good to stop these guys by terrifying the crap out of them. But the backfire was that it turned out that the villages also became afraid that there was a vampire. And guess what? There's only one guy living up in that castle that some of these women had been with. And it was a pretty easy determination of like, who could be the vampire? Well, it's definitely that weird magical guy up in the castle. And so I had to face them coming to my castle, burning it down, killing me as a vampire, etc. And believe me, when I came to the full understanding of what had happened in that life and also why, since I was young, I had all these people. They would always tell me I look like this guy in this vampire show, or I would look like this vampire in this other thing. And it always weirded me out.
Yeah.
Because I'm so committed to energetically being loving and in service and healing and protection. And I'm a freaking guardian. I mean, I literally had visions when I was 15 that I'm more like Blade. I'm a vampire killer. Like I find vampires. And so it really weirded me out for a long time. And when I finally saw everything that happened in that life, I understood and I let go. And I went through a healing around it that echoed through multiple other lifetimes where I had been through things, including being a samurai, where I killed myself a few lifetimes before that, which is one of the stories in my book, Lifetimes.
Amazing. I'm excited to dig into lifetimes because I think at the end of the day, any of this stuff, regardless if somebody has no interest or belief in past life, the core basis of all of this is integration into this particular life.
That's right.
And how do you not escape everything, but actually live and breathe and embody in the best and highest version of yourself?
That's right.
Where do you think, if somebody right now is we'll just call it curious.
Okay.
They're curious about the quantum field. They're curious about past lives. They're curious enough to say, oh, this is interesting. You know, this guy has a science-based background, but he's also incredibly open-minded to stuff I've normally shied away from and thought was hooey. Whatever other kind of words they want to use, probably more BS.
Right.
If someone wants to dip their toe into real magic, where's a great place to start?
Yeah. I mean, I think starting with your own body and the energetic field is the right place to start. To get to know your chi, your prana, your ki, because there are unlimited things that working with your own vibrational field will teach you. That being said, most of us have already had dreams from past lives. Most of us have already had little visions or hints. There's people that we've met that were like, why do I feel like I just trust you completely? I just met you. And why is there other people that you meet and you're like, I really don't trust that person. Like, really don't trust that person. And we don't have answers for those questions. But most of us have had those experiences, the same way as we've all had experiences of someone looking at us and we could feel it and we turned and we looked and somebody's looking at us, which no one in school ever taught you about, but is because you have energetic field and the field of their eyes looking at you is affecting your body, right? So these are pointing you to a deeper science. And the deeper scientists right now, we just call this metaphysics. But in reality, our physical model is not complete until it describes these phenomena, which is why I've been so passionate about a unified physics approach and mechanisms. And in this book, I describe a lot of the mechanisms that I believe provide the scientific anchoring for how memory is passed through lifetimes. And it's actually genetic. But more than that too, protons in my model are hard drives, and every proton stores information every second of existence, meaning that every proton is growing along with the whole universe and remembering every interaction that's happened with it. So this table, for example, is full of rich conversations. Right. These mics, the metal especially, is literally charged with data from the conversations that have happened around this table. But the question then becomes, well, okay, so if everything's remembering everything, how do we access that? And the answer is already very simple: entanglement. So this is why when we go to ancient sacred sites around the world, you go to Peru, you go to Bolivia, Egypt, obviously, that's one of the big ones. Lots of people have been incarnated in Egypt over all of the different dynasties and eras and times, leading all the way back to prehistorical times, what we call the Atlantean period, or the period post the Lesser Dryas, for example, leading into the dynasties. And so when you go to these places in Egypt, many, many people get around a certain temple or a certain site and something happens. whether they're singing or they're just present or they touch the wall, all of a sudden it's like another aspect of themselves comes out.
Yeah.
And that aspect of them is the person they were that touched that same stone, that stood in that same place, and whose energetic field still, as a soul level, in the multiple levels of bodies we have across the planes in metaphysics, actually have resonant entangled properties with the information inside the stone. And the next thing you know, you are plugged into the hard drive that is these ancient megaliths, and you're receiving data from them about you and about your experience in the past in that place and that location.
I love that. And I'm definitely going to have you back to drop in on some of these things, because I had that at Mount Sinai in a way that was beyond words.
Yes.
And once things clicked in, everything made sense. And I think a lot of this stuff, if you're just looking at it from the outside in, is we all have so many unanswered questions that we tend to avoid. And when we can sit back and realize that sometimes the awareness that comes from both experience, from plant medicine, from studying what some could call the occult, basically just means the unknown, right? Just means I'm open-minded. Hey,
the mysteriousness,
the mysterious, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to put the woo music behind it. You can be just like, hey, I'm just open-minded, right?
Right.
What's the antithesis?
In what people don't understand.
Closed-minded and disinterested? Like, that sounds really boring.
Right.
So the open-mindedness, because we like to use the words that are empowering over here, which is like, wow, I am an open-minded, curious, excited, non-ego driven, childlike being who's always learning. That is a much more empowering energy. And I think that truth resonates so much better for people like you and me. And I think that's why we get to have these fun experiences and always get to play and explore. And
that's right.
I just want to, first off, thank you for coming on, but I want to leave you with one last little question, which is, what does harmony mean to you?
Well, harmony is an extraordinary concept that goes across literally every field of study you can imagine. As a DJ, I find harmony between tracks and the keys of those tracks and the beats and the speeds and all of that to create an experience of transition between the tracks and the music that's seamless, flawless, or sometimes is actually an entirely new sound experience because I have the bass of this track with the highs of that track, etc.
Awesome.
And then you go into color and light phenomena, and you realize that harmony is actually what it's like when the lighting is just right enough to make you relax and feel good and allow you to see the beauty in the space that you're in. But when you get deeper into the physics side of harmony, you realize that harmony is actually when you have vibrational coherence between any two things that hit a kind of lock point of vibrational coherence where the waves are in sync, even if it's like this, but the top and the bottoms are hitting in the same spot. You get these shared vibrational states. And shared vibrational states, and specifically shared vibrational states within particular geometries, is, in my model, the key to how entanglement happens. So as soon as you're in a shared vibrational state with a similar geometry, 2 points in space-time suddenly become open to each other through an Einstein-Rosen bridge or an Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen quantum entangled field. And essentially you have a wormhole between those 2 points in space-time, a standing wave wormhole where data is being exchanged. And this is how, when you're thinking about a close friend that you love a lot, that you spend a lot of time with, they might start thinking about you too. And they get your little ping and they think about you, you're thinking about them, and all of a sudden you're feeling all the love between you guys. And the next thing you know, one of you texts each other and you're like, oh my God, I was just thinking about you.
Yes.
And so harmony is actually, in a way, you could say it's a strategic toolkit for opening gates in space-time for transdimensional experience. Or like a wormhole key, you know?
A wormhole key. Rapid wormhole keys. That's the name of this podcast. Nice. Freaking amazing. Yeah. Well, Adam, thank you for bringing the cosmos down to the earth with us today. Mm-hmm. And if you felt something that really woke up with you during this conversation, I want you to pay attention. I want you to notice the synchronicities that show up in the next few days, the little winks from the field, and I want you to follow one of them. You can dive deeper into Adam's work on the planetary operating systems he's building by following the links that we'll have in the show notes. Mm-hmm. Go explore, stay curious, let your own direct experience be the loudest voice in the room. Definitely check out his newest book, Lifetimes. I'm excited to drop into it myself. And if this episode stirred something in you, it would mean a lot if you share it with one person who's ready to think and feel on a bigger scale. And if you hit subscribe, rate, and review the show, please do that so we can bring these conversations to more people. Remember, the next level is not up, it's in. I'm Kyle Brown. This is the Rapid Harmony Podcast, and I'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you, brother. This was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure. My pleasure.
All right, my friend, if this episode sparked something in you, don't just wander off into the abyss of the internet. Hit subscribe so you can actually get the good stuff when it drops. And if you're feeling generous or mildly enlightened, leave some love in a review. It takes just 30 seconds, and somehow it feeds the algorithm gods so they know to send more people who really need it. Now, if you want to step deeper into my world, rapidharmony.com is where the real magic lives. Coaching, community, rituals, and a few surprises that are way better than just scrolling around another motivational reel and not doing anything about it. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being you. And remember, your inner harmony isn't hiding. It's just waiting for you to pay attention. I'll see you on the next episode. Now go subscribe before you forget.